love a good story. You know, when you have a conversation with someone and immediately you realize that their mind is different, that their way of thinking is unique and bold and inspiring. That's how I feel about my next guest, Robert Dos Santos, international award-winning director who is renowned for telling emotionally evoking stories through video. His work has been awarded at some of the most prestigious film events on the planet, including the Los Angeles Film Awards, Hollywood International Golden Age Festival, and Best Global Shorts. His work has been recognized in festivals across the UK, Croatia, Canada, Sweden, France, Germany, and the US. And Robert himself has received honorable mention in the Hollywood New Directors category. Marketing relies on good storytelling, and I'm about to pick his brain about just that. I have no doubt you will enjoy this episode, and please don't forget to share your comments. Wow, Rob, it's so good to have you with me for this podcast. I think if we're going to be discussing anything storytelling and how to evoke emotions, you are definitely the person to speak to. I think your work is absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So your job is director, and I know that it's a role that has transitioned in your career, going from law into working in production and now as a director. But what exactly does your role entail? Like, what does a director do?
So I've figured out only fairly recently that the term of a director is pretty broad and is very different, I think, depending on the area of the profession, and then also depending on the person themselves. You get technical directors and performance-driven directors, and then you get directors in film, you get directors in TV series, you get directors in commercials, and all of them fulfill different roles and come in at different places. And a good example of that is in a film, your director's basically God. Everybody listens to the director and whatever he says goes. But then when you jump over into the TV realm, TV series and all the rest is there. They're kind of a gun for hire, and you've got your script writers who are the actual leads of the series, and they dictate what happens. And you'll have a handful of directors coming in directing a single episode, and they're only there to kind of fulfill the function of making sure that what the writers have written and want happen. To most extent, there's obviously some that are a lot more hands-on, but it's interesting that everyone kind of has this idea that a director is the be-all and end-all, and it's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes on a commercial, it's very much the same thing. I've been chatting to a production company I'm working with in Los Angeles, and there in America, the American system is your director is actually only on set. They're not involved at all before, and they're not involved at all after. If they're involved in the edit, that's quite rare. So what will happen is the director will get his boards, and the boards are basically the storyboards, which show out what the shots need to be. And they walk onto set, they tell everybody how to do what they need to do, and they're kind of more of a liaison between the agency and client and the crew. And as soon as they're done shooting, he's off, and they never see him again. He doesn't see the edit, he doesn't do sound, he doesn't do color grading, none of that. Whereas the European system and then the South African system is a little bit more hands-on. So for me, I was taught wrong doing law. I had no idea what it was or what it is. So I just understood the director as the person who does everything. So I taught myself wrong by teaching myself a bit of everything. So I tried to teach myself makeup, hair, wardrobe, color schemes, production design, camera, composition, lighting. And the funny thing is you don't necessarily need that as a director. As a director, you just need to know what the end goal is. And what you do is you hire people who are proficient at those particular jobs, and then you tell them, this is what I want. So to be a good director, I think you need probably two qualities. One, you need to have an idea of what you want, a very solid and concrete idea. And then two, you need to be able to explain that idea to perfection. And I think those are probably the two good qualities of a director.
That must be quite a big talent, just being able to explain the idea, because obviously everything you're doing is visual. And we often find with our clients as well, you know, whether it's coming from the client's brief or from our strategy, like to get people to align on something visual is often very difficult, because you can picture it in your head, but what you interpret and what someone else interprets is quite difficult.
Yes, that's 100% correct. So you need to get quite detailed into it, and that's why treatments, pitch documents, storyboards, scripts are very, very important, and you need to have your hand in those, if not make them yourself. So by mistake, I taught myself design because I thought, okay, I need to know how to design, because so I need to be able to show and draw and show everybody what it is that's going on. But it's served me well, because it's now you're able to be very clear. So that's also quite an important part of the whole.
But don't you think it's beneficial? I mean, you keep saying it's a mistake or you taught yourself wrong. And I know you say you don't need to know those things, but isn't it beneficial when you're giving a brief to a makeup artist or to whoever's involved, if you've got this very specific idea of how you want something to come out, don't you find it helps you to have that background knowledge?
Yes, I'd be lying if I said it was not beneficial. In fact, I almost think it's mandatory, even though I say it's a mistake, because you don't need it, because you honestly don't need it. As long as you know what it is you want and you've got the right people with you, you don't need to have it. But at the same time, you're not always going to be armed with people who are at the top perfection. You might not know the ins and outs, but if you do, you're able to more better explain yourself. And if it's not coming right, you're able to tell them what to do. And that might annoy one or two people, but at least you're able to push to get exactly what it is that you want. Yeah. So I think there's a saying that my old Jewish boss, while I was a lawyer, wonderful, wonderful man, he always used to say, you know everything or you know nothing. Because in law, if you forget one case, the whole thing can go to shambles. And I think the same's true for directing and filmmaking. Is you kind of have to know everything, or you're not acting with intention. If you're not moving the camera correctly and the wardrobe's not matching the background or contrasting against it to give some sort of emotion, you're kind of just getting lucky. And I think eventually the luck runs out. So yeah, I think it's actually important, even though I did do it wrong.
So on the note of visual interpretations, because exactly like I say, you have this idea in your mind and you can go to all the lengths to try and articulate that, and obviously to capture it. Like that's your main job, is to capture those specifics. But a lot of your stuff is quite artistic, and I'm a big lover of art because a lot of the time it's left up to your own individual interpretation. So how do you find with your work, how much of it is meant to be left up to individual interpretation, and how much of it is meant to deliver like a very specific message that should be kind of obvious?
So I think you have to do both, strangely enough. I think you have to deliver something which gives a specific message. I think if you go out there and you're like, I'm just going to, at least for me, I think everybody has their own ways and means, but for me, if I go out there and I just throw something into there and I'm like, let's see what people feel about this, I feel like I haven't done my job. I feel like it's maybe a bit lazy, because you can kind of just do that with anything. Let's just put some cool images together and see what happens. It's kind of like with just writing a letter, writing a poem, anything like that, is you have an idea and you need to get that idea across. And it's quite difficult because everybody views the world in a different way. So you have to use movement that's in a worldwide sense, and you need to use colors in a worldwide sense and actions in a worldwide sense, so that can all be interpreted in the same way. But then again, if you're just telling people what to think, they get bored very quickly. No one wants to be told what to think. We all want to figure it out. So you kind of have to layer it a little bit and suggest and hint at what it is, but in a clear enough way that you're leading them there. And it's one of those things. If you tell someone something, they'll just forget it. But if you let them figure it out, they'll remember it, and it'll go all the way in. So that's kind of the philosophy I adopt, and hopefully I'll pull it off every now and then.
I think you absolutely do. And I think that's the key to being successful, and especially in the advertising space, in building commercials, and even from outside in marketing, you want to be able to evoke an emotion and get people to feel something when they watch it, and to like have this moment. I mean, in some of your work that I've seen, in most of it, you kind of have this like aha moment at the end, or there's definitely like this crescendo to what you're feeling. So emotions are so important. But how do you know exactly what kind of emotions you want to evoke, when you're putting a film together?
So I think two answers to that is, one is, pretty early on, because of the intention of the piece. If you, like, say the Mercedes thing, you want to create a sense of wonderment and just wow. Is so immediately, like, this is our intention. With the Restonic one, where the young girl goes to space, that's about inspiration. You want to be inspired, and let's create something of someone being inspired. So that happens quite early on, and then from that you kind of get into the scripting phase. And especially when writing, is I will feel that very specific emotion while writing it, because if I don't feel it while I'm writing it and envisioning it, it's not going to translate at the very end. So what happens is, it's about finding that emotion in the beginning, conjuring it up through images and story, and then hoping to sustain that in your mind and your body for long enough so that you can put it into picture and music, and then carry that through. So it's I suppose, starts at the beginning, and you have to really conjure it up at some point, and then keep that.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, Restonic is the example I was thinking of. I could imagine getting this client brief of like, we want to sell a good night's rest. We want to sell being able to dream big while you sleep, or, that kind of being the idea. But then going from that basic idea to this hugely inspirational sort of like female empowerment story of this young girl achieving, the most unlikely future and these big, bold dreams. That's amazing. Does that kind of stuff get led from you? I mean, does the client brief kind of remain basic, that it leaves a lot of creativity up to you, or how do you get from that point to creating this beautiful emotional story?
So again, I think this goes back to me learning things wrong. Is so what usually would happen is, especially in advertising, is they come to you with boards, and the advertising team, the copywriter, and the art director, they come up with an idea along with the team, and then they put an idea together. And once they've got that and they've proved that with the client, they go look for a production company and get a director to then go make their idea come true. So I didn't know that. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to come up with the idea, and then I'm going to go and shoot it. So from the very first thing I've done, I've come up with the idea, pitched it to client, and said, hey, this is what I think you guys should do. And fortunately, that's kind of caught on. And now I get bigger things where people are like, cool, we've got this roundabout idea, or we have no idea. What do you think? Where should we take this? And then I'll take that seed, or I'll just walk into the empty room and then come up with the idea. But it's very much, okay, what is our end goal? What is that intention? And how do we translate that intention into a visual story which achieves that goal and that intention? So very much from the screenwriting process all the way up into the end, which for me it's almost become mandatory, because I love every single part of this process. It's not necessarily the result. The result's great, but it's the act of coming up with the idea, writing it down, like putting on music, getting those ideas going, getting onto set, sitting in a dark room and editing, doing the music and the sound. That the whole process is what makes it enjoyable.
You can actually tell that in your work. You can tell that you are passionate about every step and that you've been involved in every detail. So that's kind of a best case scenario process where everything goes smoothly and you and the client agree. But has there been a situation, because I know we've definitely had it before from like a graphic design perspective or creative campaign, where the client disagrees with our direction and goes in a direction that we don't necessarily agree with. And then you come to this like ethical standpoint of, we don't really want to put our name on something like that because design-wise, it's not the kind of thing we want to put out there. Or, you know, we at loggerheads because the client wants what they want and we try and give advice, and you have to somewhere, you know, find a middle ground. Have you ever had a situation like that where you've got the client brief and just gone like, oh my God, no, I can't do this?
So I think is maybe to answer that. One is I haven't really, because I think I'm quite fastidious on the idea phase, the production phase early on. So it's like, okay, what are we doing? How are we doing it? What is the process? And just making sure that everything's very, very, very clear at the beginning, so that there are no problems later on, so that everybody knows what we're going to do. Because I'm sure you know, it's incredibly costly to go on set, to shoot, and to hire all these people. So having things clear as day before we step onto set is quite important. So I've been very fortunate. I haven't had anything where we've got it and they're like, okay, I'm not so sure about this. And then perhaps a reason why that happens, the second part of that is, I think with just the things that I do is I tell stories in the way I shoot. And so that's kind of been the style, and that's what I do. So if someone comes to me and they say like, sell this chicken burger and it's $9.99, I'm not your guy. I can't do that. Like, there's someone who's passionate about that and who can knock that out the park. But I'm not going to do that. If you want something that looks a little bit like a movie, or it's a story driven thing, then I'm the guy. But if it's not that, then probably not. So I think with you guys, your agency, so you've got the whole collection of everybody and you need to deal with the many various demands, whereas I would be one funnel outlet for an agency. So a much more niche aspect to that. So I probably don't get it as bad as you guys do.
It can be a disaster, I promise you. So I want to touch on something sort of more relevant to what we do in social media, but very much plays a part, I'm sure, in what you do as well. Is over the last couple of years, the trend has changed on social media platforms with a big focus on short form content, on mobile first content. And that's a big thing. Things like YouTube shorts, even mobile optimized ad campaigns that are shot in portrait, obviously things like reels and TikTok videos. How has that come into play, if it has, in your industry? And what are your thoughts on that direction?
So I'll try to answer them in part. I think the impact on the industry has been huge. A lot of positives, mostly, I would say. A few negatives, but I would say in general, the uptake of work has been tremendous. There are an insane amount of companies out there sending out work, and it's allowed for kind of this burgeoning of artists. You see on Instagram, you see so many up and coming directors, cinematographers, photographers. Whereas 10 years ago, there was no such not even 5 years ago, perhaps, there was no such thing as content creator. And photography was a bit blah, blah. And so was videography and directing, and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas now it's become an essential service. It's everywhere and it's paid extraordinarily well. And it's very well respected. Like, my parents were not too happy when I wanted to be a writer, so got shipped off to law school. But now I think parents would think twice. It's really helped the profession, and you can see people are doing pretty well. So there's some serious positives to that. A potential downside is shooting in various formats. That's an absolute pain, and the reason why is because there's a huge difference between landscape and portrait, and they tell different stories. And for example, and I had this recently, is if you say shooting a foot on a vertical screen is lovely. It goes like that, good. Now you put it into portrait, and now the foot's being cut off. So to actually shoot that shot, you need to step all the way back, which means you either need to shoot the shot twice, or you have, and to frame it properly for both formats, or you need to have either one good shot and one very bad shot, or two all right shots. And I'm never happy about compromising the quality. So it's not a downside, but it's something that needs to just be considered and taken care of. And when you're on a set and you're racing against time and trying to maintain quality, the ability to jump back and take two shots is a difficulty. And to explain that to clients and everyone is a task.
Well, that's the thing. It's not so much of just like sort of cropping to fit the frame. It's a whole different shoot. And then you want to try and get consistency across both your landscape shoot and your portrait shoot. I think that's a difficult thing. I mean, for us as well, we do some video content for clients, and we want to be shooting professional stuff for reels. But then the understanding is, unless we do two shoots, we can only really use it in that platform. We can't now put it onto, you know, your website for a desktop view. Though funny enough, we're looking at a lot of design more mobile optimized anyway. But yeah, it's very interesting. And I think the fascinating thing, or the inspiring thing that you touched on as well, is how the industry has transformed, and it's opened up this amazing space for creators in what was previously sort of a niche little industry to be in, and you had to really stand out to make it happen. Now you can become a photographer, a cinematographer, any kind of content creator, whether you're writing or vlogging or blogging from your home. And I think the resources available to be able to create quality content is also amazing. But on that note, does that also have an impact on the professionals in the line of work that you're doing, where you're getting these up and coming, learn from home photographers and videographers creating content for clients?
So what do you mean by that? Is it like, is there competition? Is that what you're asking?
Do you find it takes work away, or is it just a completely different client?
No, so I think there's a few layers to that question, or to the answer to that question is, I think there's always a lot going around. There's so much going on. And I think once you delve into the world of competition and watching out for people, I think you're going to have a bad time. I don't think that's a good way to live life. And then I think with me is, like I said, is I do my specific way of telling stories and way of presenting stories. So, and I'm the only one who can do that. It's my specific style. It's the way I do it. So there's literally no one who can compete with me for what I do. Like, there'll be people in the same arena and all of that, but the way I do things is very, and so I'm not too worried about that. And I think it's actually beautiful. I think having lots of people there with lots of different voices putting out work is just tremendous. And if there's someone who's got a style that's more specific for something, then that's the right thing to do, is go with that person, do that particular. But like I mentioned, there's enough for everybody to eat. There's a tremendous amount of work out there, and I'm constantly busy and haven't really felt that. And if anything, it's just inspiring to just see like how much there is going on. I just love it.
I think there's also this exponential growth in terms of the expectation. You've got to constantly be on your toes in any kind of content creation to make sure that you up to date with what people are asking for, and different trends and different styles. I mean, I know you've got a very specific style, but I'm sure it does keep you on your feet as well to go, okay, well, what's happening in the market? Because it's so sort of fast moving across all different platforms.
So I would say no. I think for me, very specifically for
Yeah.
me, no. I'm very specifically and very consciously do not chase trends. I
Okay.
think that is a good way, again, is like looking out at competition and like what's going, is chasing trends. uh, chasing trends is a good way to make yourself mad. You'll never keep up with trends, and you'll only ever be a flavor of the week, and you'll spark. People will be like, oh my god, look what he's doing, and then you'll be like, oh my god, everyone loves me. And the way trends are going this now, it's like I would have said a year ago, I'd say like you'll be cool for a few months and then or a few years, and then you old hat. But now you'll be
Very
cool
true.
for a week. Like trends are so fast. And personally, I have a distaste for the word trend. Storytelling is timeless. We're still telling the same stories we told 4,000 years ago, and we're still paying money to go to cinema to watch those stories, and still being astounded at what we learn about ourselves while watching those stories. So if you can just tell a story in a timeless manner, it's timeless and will remain timeless. And I think that's, at least for me, the objective. So I see what people are doing and take notes and very aware of what's going on in the world. But again, I think it's just, I know what I like and I know what I do, and I can only do what I can do. I can't do what other people can do. And I think what if I tried to do that, I would just fail.
Wow, I must say that's actually so refreshing to hear. And just while you were saying that, like speaking about it, in the way you told that exact story, you evoked an emotion of me of like, let's take a breath, because it is exactly that, that timelessness. I think it's a refreshing approach. And I think being able to have your mark and just stick to telling quality stories is so much better, because you're so right. Any of the influencers or brands or anything that come in that are like this hot trend, the quicker you go up, the quicker you come down almost, whereas if you have this very solid story, I think you're quite right, you become classic and timeless, which is great.
And that's not to knock trends. I don't want to knock trends, because they're still quite relevant and I think necessary as a human species. Is we
Yeah.
need that little bit of distraction, and trends do add color to our lives. If we look at, say, the movement in the 60s, that was a trend. Things lasted longer back then, so it was, the hippie movement was a good 5-6 year trend, but that fell away. And then 70s disco, 80s cocaine cowboys in Miami, etc., etc. Like little trends
Yeah.
add sparkle and color to life, and then that allows you to draw inspiration and then perhaps create something layered out of all of those inspirations. But there's still a beauty and a necessity for trends. I'm just not a trend person.
I think the balance is, and what I like about what you said is not chasing trends, not hunting for them, not trying to be trending, and that's often the advice I give my clients as well, is I don't want to look at competitors. I don't want to see what everyone else is doing or what's like in the now. How do we speak to your specific differences? What sets you apart? What are your values? How are you going to add value? And through that, by being innovative and, telling a story in a different way, if that creates a trend or goes viral, then great. But it's not trying to sort of like aim for a trend or follow a trend. Rather, if you start a trend by being innovative, even better.
Yeah, yeah.
So just in closing off, you've obviously achieved so much. I mean, you've won international awards for your work. What's next for you? Like what's the next big goal for you?
So the next goal is my first feature film, and I've just recently been offered funding for that by one of the big streamers.
Amazing.
So yeah, so going to jump onto that, and really, really looking forward to taking a bite out of that.
That sounds incredible. So please keep us updated. I'd be happy to share all those details as and when they come out. It's very, very exciting. And I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Hardy dolls in the background to help us out.
Always perfect.
But thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to continuing to watch your work and be inspired by your work. And I hope we get to chat again soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.